Los Angeles. It's the Tom Leykis Show.
Oh, God.
And now, he is Tom Leykis.
6 minutes after the hour. Thank you for tuning into the Tom Leykis Show. This is where America gets together to talk about the issues you really care about. This is America's fastest growing radio talk program. A talk show that is not hosted by the usual gang of right-wing wackos or convicted felons. No. I am your host. Write down our toll-free telephone number. You're going to need it. It's 1-800-5800-TOM. 1-800-5800-866. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you are listening to our broadcast live, we are being simulcast on C-SPAN, so you can just do a little channel flipping, and you will find us on television right now, as a matter of fact. There I am. Hi. Yeah, okay, fine. Get that out of the way. Had to get that out of the way somewhere here. Thank you for tuning in. I wanted to talk a little bit about this Newt Gingrich deal, and also a little bit about Democrats and why they have done a lousy job of telling us what they stand for and who they are. They've been bullied by conservatives, whether it be talk show hosts or incoming speakers of the House. They just are not, it seems to me, able to articulate a position. They're not able to articulate on behalf of the people who Democrats once stood for, which was working people. If you're not working, a tax cut doesn't do you any good. Period. You're not paying any taxes. There's no job. My dad doesn't need a tax cut. Know why? He didn't have a job. He didn't have a pension. He has a pension. It's like that, okay? He didn't have any investments in mutual funds. Very few interest in things like stocks or bonds. He's got a mortgage. He's got a second mortgage. He's got bills, bills, bills. He had cancer surgery a couple of years ago. It's always a risk that cancer could come back. My dad worked at a newspaper for the better part of 43 years, the New York Post. He was the unit manager of the Newspaper Guild of the New York Post. Okay, so he was like, he was the union guy. And the New York Post was always, it seemed to be, teetering on the brink of extinction. And somehow it always survived. First under an owner named Dorothy Schiff. And then under Rupert Murdoch, who bought the paper in 1976. And then again under a fellow named Peter Calico. It just went on and on and on. And it seemed that my dad was always involved in union negotiations where the end was near. And somehow the newspaper always survived. Well, Rupert Murdoch bought the newspaper back from a bankrupt Peter Calico. And my dad, many times as a union guy, agreed to defer raises, and instead of raises, agreed to take increases in his severance pay that he'd get somewhere down the road. Well, let me put this in brief for you. Peter Calico, the former owner of the New York Post, filed for bankruptcy. And by the way, even though he filed for bankruptcy, part of our wacky bankruptcy laws in America mean that, well, even though you claim to be bankrupt, at least on paper, you get to keep things like your cars, your houses. Peter Calico, if I recall correctly, owned 22 cars, got to keep them all. House in Montauk Point, Long Island. Oh, yes. But he's bankrupt, folks. And that seemed awfully peculiar at the time, but not nearly as peculiar as when Rupert Murdoch blew out my dad's union. Just blew them out. Boom. Blew them out. And when they got blown out, my dad was expecting to get somewhere in the vicinity of $95,000 in severance pay for 43 years of service. And instead of getting that, he was told that Mr. Calico going bankrupt had something to do with him not being able to get his severance pay. So instead of getting $95,000, he got somewhere in the vicinity of $7,000. He got something on the order of 12 cents on the dollar. And he lost his job. My dad is 62 years old. He works at a liquor store. He has 43 years of experience in the newspaper business and can't find a job. He can't get job retraining. And if he gets job retraining, let's face facts. How much time does he have to retrain before he's 64 or 65? And then what are the odds that he's going to get a job? So he lives on a minimal pension, Social Security, and that's about it. And he's got an awful lot of responsibility there, an awful lot of bills to pay. And, well, I got to tell you, a middle-class tax cut doesn't do my dad a lot of good. And I know my dad's not the only one. Let me just say this. I am not saying this because I feel persecuted. My family is persecuted. Oh, no. My family's not the only one. There are many people like my dad who were union employees in the 40s, the 50s, the 60s. People who worked hard. People who thought you went to the assembly line every day, you did a day's work, you kept your nose clean, and one day you get to retire, make a little pension money, got a little something put away, you get your severance pay. And there's an awful lot of people, whether they be at newspapers, whether they be on assembly lines, wherever they are. My dad was one of only 300 people who lost their jobs. May I say that a lot of these people thought they were going to be retiring to Miami or something. And where are they now? They're like my dad. They're working in a liquor store for a few bucks an hour, hoping somebody will hear about their plight. And here is the president who is supposed to represent the working man, and my dad was a working man, let me tell you, for 43 years at the same place. Middle-class tax cut isn't doing him a whole hell of a lot of good. Giving him a tax deduction on college tuition, it's a little late. So essentially, and I know my folks can't deal with this and probably don't want me to be saying this, but I've got to say it because I've got the White House watching now, Mom and Dad, and there's no other chance I'm going to get to say it. My mom and dad are sitting there with my dad facing the possibility of more cancer surgery. And my mom and dad are sitting there with, they don't even want to look at how much money they owe. One day the end is going to come. They're not going to be able to pay the bills. They're not going to be able to pay him. My dad's going to be in the hospital. Guess what? When my dad lost his job, he went on a thing called COBRA. That's when they give you health insurance from your previous job after you are fired, right? Or you're laid off, or you resign to pursue other interests, or whatever they say these days. Or you're terminated without prejudice, or whatever they do. My dad, who lives with my mom, was paying $400 and some odd a month. Understand, he's on a small pension and Social Security. My dad was paying $450 a month for health insurance. That's over $5,000 a year. Now, if that isn't enough, my dad, who had cancer and may have it again, my dad now faces a 72% increase in his COBRA to over $700 a month for health insurance. We're not talking about some lazy bum here, the kind of lazy bums that the Rush Limbaughs and the Newt Gingriches like to talk about. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about a man who worked. We're talking about a man who sold Christmas trees to make extra money before Christmas when I was a kid. We're talking about a guy who worked 7 days a week when I was 12 and 13 years old, and I never saw him. He left at 6 o'clock in the morning and came home 11 o'clock at night. He sold ice cream from a soft ice cream truck in Long Island. I've hardly seen my dad most of the time I was growing up because he was working. This is a working person we're talking about. This is the kind of person that the Newt Gingriches of the world want you to believe is some kind of a lazy, irresponsible bum who doesn't deserve any help, who should have provided for himself. He did the best he could. He still does the best he can. He still goes out to work every day, even though I think my dad is one of the better newspaper people in this country. My dad is in the soup. And I want to know what a middle-class tax cut is going to do for people like him. And it's not just my dad. It's people who worked on the assembly lines in Kenosha, Wisconsin, and Flint, Michigan. It's people who worked in the South at various plants that had the factories taken out from under them. People in the Rust Belt. People who worked in places like Troy, New York, where they had the Arrow shirt factory that just left town to avoid the unions and go down south. There's a lot of people like that out there. And we've got a president who disguises himself as a Republican, talking about tax cuts, talking about defense spending, Hello? There are people who work their whole lives who are seeing their lives go up in smoke. And we have a Democratic president who doesn't understand, who doesn't articulate this. All he's concerned about is getting reelected in 1996. Let me tell you something. If you don't start being true to the people who elected you, if you don't start being true to the working people of America, even they are going to abandon you. Do you think people who support Newt Gingrich are going to vote for Bill Clinton? Give it up. You might as well be what you are, Bill Clinton. You might as well be a Democrat. I am not, by the way, a Democrat or a Republican. I'm in that big middle. But I got to tell you something. I am getting awfully frustrated with the fact that Republicans are doing a better job of PR than Democrats, who are always hiding behind the skirts of Flax and PR people, and they have layers and layers of George Stephanopoulos and Dee Dee Myers and Richard Strausses who call in and answer for the president. The president doesn't answer for himself, and I'm not trying to bait the president to call in. I'm just saying, when we want a Republican, just get on the phone. I interviewed Newt. I had him on. Bob Dornan, we have his home phone number. You call Bob at home, he'll come on the program. What a shame that people who represent the interests of working class Americans, people who don't think that everybody who's out of a job is a lazy bum, what a shame that politicians like that feel compelled to say, who's going to be on the show with him? Well, what's the opinion of the host? Well, he's going to be busy. Why don't we send Joe Blow, who you've never heard of, to come on, and he can answer for the senator, for the president, for the head of the Democratic Party, for, please. And I want to say one more thing, speaking of Rupert Murdoch, and this brings me to a story that came out today. You may not be aware of this because it's kind of a media story, and it probably stays on the business pages of your newspaper. The aforementioned Rupert Murdoch, who owns TV Guide and the Fox television networks, and used to own the Star, Star Magazine, and he owns Current Affair and The Simpsons and all these different shows. Rupert Murdoch also owns a publishing company. Did you know that? Yes, he does. HarperCollins. It's a book publisher. Now, why is that relevant? Well, let me tell you why. A number of folks have noticed and brought to the attention of the Federal Communications Commission that the television stations that are run by Fox television stations are not owned by America or Americans. Do you know that a radio or television station cannot be more than 20% owned by a foreign person or a foreign entity? So in other words, if you come from England or Australia or Japan and you want to buy into a TV or radio station, you can't own more than 20% of it. Well, recently we find out that the Fox television stations are 99% or more owned by a company called News Corporation, or News America, which is an Australian corporation. Rupert Murdoch was from Australia. He's a naturalized American. So now you have an Australian company that is controlling a television network and several television stations, including the TV stations that broadcast some of the stations that broadcast NFL football on Sunday, okay? Well, an investigation has been launched into this to find out if that's really true, that it is controlled by an Australian corporation, the Fox Television Network. And isn't it interesting, today we find out that the same Rupert Murdoch, who's being investigated by the Federal Communications Commission, offers a $4 million, $4.5 million advance to write a book for HarperCollins too. Dun, 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 dun. Newt Gingrich, the incoming Speaker of the House, and someone who has to oversee whether foreign ownership of American television and radio stations is a good thing. So here you have, and this is very interesting, here you have Republicans talking about all those darn foreigners who are coming in here and snatching up all the real estate and taking all our welfare and all that. Meanwhile, a slick Australian, they're foreigners too, even though they speak English, by the way. A slick Australian named Rupert Murdoch slips in here, buys all these television stations under the name Fox Television Stations, or Fox Television Group, or News America, or News Corporation. And then we find out News Corporation is an Australian corporation. So there's an Australian company operating American licensed television stations, which appears to be in violation of the law. And now Newt Gingrich and the people in the House of Representatives, they've got to investigate this. So what happens? Suddenly, Newt is an author. Suddenly, he gets a $4.5 million advance to write a book. Is that an advance to write a book? Or is that a bribe? I'm just asking a question. And it's a question that the Rush Limbaughs of the world are not going to ask. Let me give you our telephone number. I think you might have some comments on some of the things we've had to say. It's toll-free from across North America. It's 1-800-5800-TOM. 1-800-5800-866. And when we come back, guess who? It's Republican Congressman Bob Dornan. So easily accessible. Just take the old dialing finger and dial up old B1 Bob. He's always out there. Now, if you want to reach the President of the United States, well, let's talk to 27 people up on. But you want to talk to B1 Bob or Newt Gingrich, they are available, let me tell you. All right, we'll have Bob with us and then some of your telephone calls coming up. 21 minutes after the hour, we are coast to coast from Los Angeles, both on the Westwood One Entertainment Radio Network and on C-SPAN. My name is Tom Leykis. Stay right there.
Coast to Coast, the Tom Leykis Show.
Oh, baby, 26 minutes after the hour. America's fastest growing radio talk program, the Tom Leykis Show from Los Angeles. Thank you for tuning in. Joining us on our newsmaker line, because he loves us, is Republican Congressman Bob Dornan, who is, of course, representing the 46th District, which is in Orange County here in Southern California. Bob, nice of you to call in. Not surprised to hear from you today.
Mr. Leykis, I'm sorry I interrupted here and cut Dornan off. I want to get some equal time here. This Dornan tried to nail me with a Moscow trip back in '92. I don't like this guy, so we used White House communications. We just interrupted his line. That's the way it's got to be.
You're out of your mind, Bob.
I'm telling you that you're on a roll here. If they put Cuomo on the air, he is so pedantic. He has a different type of energy than you have, than a lot of the right-wing radio hosts have. He's got this professorial, intense energy where he lectures to you. They'll try him for a while, and any of the 150-some stations you're not on will dump him and pick you up.
Oh, good.
Because you've got the drive to present the liberal point of view with fun and with energy and with a way that makes it palpable to people. They don't want to be lectured at. They want to have some fun while they're being informed.
Well, Bob, you are very nice to call in and say that. We've always had fun having you on, and this is the point. You know, I don't believe in having a show which is a relentless drumbeat of anything.
Exactly.
Any one opinion, any one person, any one cause. You and I have done shows together for years, and my God, we don't agree on a lot politically, but I would never leave you out of the mix.
Exactly. And you know, if somebody, like if I had a show right now, I would be after Bill Richardson, who's a liberal Democrat, a friend of mine, a good guy, and a super heart on all issues, human rights and civil rights. We went to Sarajevo together on the eve of the war starting a month later, and we were just heartbroken that there was no way to stop these people from going at one another. So here is Bill on a trip that I was asked to go on in North Korea. I had made a commitment to go down to Haiti. I spent all Monday down there, and to be over in Luxembourg in Belgium for the 50th anniversary of the Battle of the Bulge, which was the bloodiest battle in American history, 19,000 killed in action, and 350 prisoners executed by the SS Panzer units under Joachim Peiper. So it was a good spot to be, and I wish now that I was in North Korea. But I'd be going after Bill Richardson, a loyal son of New Mexico, and a faithful Democrat liberal.
Now, I got about 20 seconds before the break here, but a lot of people don't know you used to do this for a living here in Los Angeles.
I did, and I did it with a lot of energy, and I had on every liberal that wanted to come on. Jess Unruh, the late, great Big Daddy of Sacramento, used to come on all the time. We had a great friendship going. I put John Tunney on three times.
I'll tell you what, Bob. We're going to take a break.
Sure.
But I want to come back, and among the other things I'm going to talk about are the contract with America and some other stuff. So stay right there.
The Tom Leykis Show. Who needs the fairness doctrine? We've got the Tom Leykis Show.
26 minutes before the hour. This is America's fastest growing radio talk program. And I'm not even a right-wing wacko, a convicted felon, a bigot. I'm not on a work release program. How the hell did this happen? 1-800-5800-TOM is our telephone number. We're talking with Republican Congressman Bob Dornan, who joins us from Virginia. And, Bob, you are still there. I want to talk...
Dornan makes me sick. I'm going to have Hillary come over and kick his butt. Get off the line. You'll have your chance later.
You're a nut. You're a nut.
Serious stuff here.
Contract with America. Now, you and I haven't had a chance to talk about this, okay? But here we have the contract with America, and I'm holding it right here in my hot little hand. The contract with America, which talks about balanced budget amendments, line item vetoes, violent criminals, welfare reform.
Go to my favorite, term limits.
Term limits, which is the last one there, which we heard Newt Gingrich say they'll discuss, but they won't necessarily pass it in Congress, which I thought was awfully interesting now that he is becoming the Speaker of the House. But isn't it interesting, and maybe you can explain this to me, how it certainly seemed that once Republicans kicked Democratic butt back in November, the first issue that seemed to come up was school prayer. Where did that come from?
It's not in the contract, and I, for one, believe it was a big waste of time because everybody knows the best you're going to come up with is 30 seconds of silence. And if you're in a school district that's melting down with guns on campus and drugs everywhere, all that's going to happen is 30 seconds of checking out the newest chick in the school and everybody crossing their arms with their street symbols going 2-3 man, from which street. It's not going to work. It's a waste of time, and it diverts us from things that really can help American families, like a huge exemption for children on your 1040 form.
What do you think about the president's proposed quote-unquote middle-class tax cut?
Well, we're into a pathetic bidding season at Christmas time when we ought to be reflective. Here is the president trying to jump on this bandwagon that carried the Republicans to victory, and he's damn lucky that he didn't try to shoot his way into Haiti, because the highest-ranking people down there told me the minimum U.S. killed in action would have been 20 or so. A couple of those would have been friendly fire, no matter how hard we try to eliminate it. And I said, how many Haitians would have been killed? They said several hundred, and it would have been over in a day, but they said there still would have been several hundred deaths. How many would have been innocent people caught in the crossfire? And they said at least half. And I said, my God, this would have cost Clinton, Clinton another 20 seats. They said, well, that's your business, but it certainly wouldn't have been a good-looking thing on network TV. So Jimmy Carter, Ace Carpenter, saved Clinton and the Democrats from losing another 20 seats.
Now, how much of this contract with America is actually going to happen? I mean, you guys have the majority.
I think it's all going to happen, and the one that is going to be painful to senior Republicans is that term limit one. Now, some of my best friends in the House, Henry Hyde of Illinois, Tom DeLay, who just won the majority whip job, they have been very frank. No way for term limits before, after. They've never, they thought elections are for term limits. That's the best counterattack. But those of us who have been for term limits for 20 years, and I found my declaration, handwritten statement on a yellow legal tab from 19 years ago, this coming January 26th, and one of the big items in there when I was leaving LA Broadcasting to run was that I would only hang around 12 years max, which is what I'm doing in Orange County, and I'm keeping my word. This is my 11th and 12th year. So I'm going to stick to my guns, debate it out on the floor, and now I've come down from 12 to 6. So it is going to be a hot debate. People are going to say, what, you mean I just get the power and I have to check out in 6 years? Well, that's the promises that many of us made to keep so that somebody else can have a shot. Well, I want to make it the People's House, rotating every 6 years, people in and out, so lots of people will get a shot at being Speaker. And besides, you can leave the House and run for the Senate, the governor's race, go back to the state Senate, run for mayor somewhere, run for president, for God's sake.
You can come here and do a show, Bob.
That's right.
Come back home.
Well, see, Tom, that does make a difference. I have something to do out there in the other world. a lot of these guys can't figure out how they're ever going to make $133,600 a year ever again, and they're going to cling to this job.
All right, now, Bob, I got to run here, but I want to say this.
Sure.
I want to check back in with you regarding this contract with America.
Oh, absolutely. And look, Newt is the most dynamic thing to hit this city in a long time, and it's not just 40 years, Tom. When Hoover was hit with the crash in 29, we lost the House the next year in 30. That's 64 years ago, and we've only had 4 of those 64 years. So people like Bonnier and Gephardt, stop whining and crying. Hunker down as the loyal opposition and kick some tail the way we did for 40 years straight and for 60 out of 64. My God, if they were doomed to 20 or 30 years, they'd be jumping off the Capitol dome. We'd have to have a round-the-clock watch up there grabbing Democrats by the heels before they splatter in the east and west parking lots.
All right, Bob, I got to run here, but we're going to talk again soon. We're going to keep up with you, and we're going to find out what's going on, and I really appreciate the fact that you keep in touch with us, which is more than I can say for the
You
president.
betcha. And Tom, keep pushing term limits. It's a chance for you and I to change seats, and you can be inside the belly of the dragon for 6 fast years.
Thank you, Bob.
You betcha, pal.
Okay.
Bye.
Take
Merry
care.
Christmas.
Same to you and your family. Appreciate it. Okay, bye-bye. There goes Congressman Bob Dornan, Republican, representing the 46th District of lovely and bankrupt Orange County. But Bob had nothing to do with that. All right, coming up, your telephone calls from across America, not just on the air, on the radio, but also on C-SPAN. Our telephone number for the uninitiated, 1-800-5800-TOM. It's 1-800-5800-866. 19 minutes now before the hour. My name is Tom Leykis, and we will continue.
This is the Tom Leykis Show.
16 minutes before the hour. We're coming at you like a freight train. We're like a cancer growing across America like a big tumor. You can't stop it. The Tom Leykis Show, 1-800-5800-TOM is our telephone number. Time we took a phone call, wouldn't you say? All right, Robert in Nederland, Texas. You're on the Tom Leykis Show. Hello.
Yeah.
Robert.
Yeah, I'm here.
And I said, hello. You got to turn the TV. You think you have the TV on. Turn it down.
It's off.
Good. What can I do for you?
I just wanted to discuss the middle-class tax cuts issue. You're giving the tax cut issue a lot of flack because it's only not helping out a certain group of people.
A big group of people.
Well, yeah, a certain group of people.
A certain big group of people.
Right, a big group of people. But the point of the tax cut is to help out a group of people and stimulate the entire economy and benefit everyone in the process. And I think you're missing the point there.
But wait a minute. The economy has been improving.
Right.
I mean, first of all, we heard on this program, George Stephanopoulos called in and say that the economy has been improving the last 2 years. We don't need a tax cut to stimulate the economy. This budget is $170 billion in the red. If you want to cut spending to pay for a tax cut, don't cut spending to pay for a tax cut. Cut spending and apply the savings to the deficit. And by the way, that's what most Americans want the government to do.
But then again, I'm not necessarily advocating Clinton's proposal for tax cuts where he's cutting back all these different programs. I'm just saying the point, the idea behind the tax cuts in general, particularly the Republican version, is to benefit the entire economy, benefit the certain groups of the economy, and bring up business and things like that.
How is it going to do that?
Like that.
How is giving people a tax break on college tuition going to benefit the economy?
It's going to allow people to invest and stimulate.
Invest in what?
When they put money in the bank, when they have money to save and invest in other things, then they're going to be stimulating the economy in other sectors.
But wait a minute. If we have a $170 billion budget deficit and interest rates are going up as they have been, that means the interest on the national debt is going to go up. And that means the budget deficit is going to start going up. And then when you cut taxes and cut revenues, the budget deficit is going to go up further. We heard this argument from Republicans all through the 80s who cut taxes and the budget deficit went up and up and up and up. It went up and up and up.
As long as people are willing to invest in the government's bonds and federal invest in the federal government in general, they're still going to have money to pay off the budget deficit. It's a rolling deficit. It's not as if it goes up and it has a stopping point. We can always, as long as we have people investing in the budget.
$170 billion deficit. Do you know how much that is?
Yes, I do.
How much?
It's a lot of money. But
It's a lot of money. And,
it's not money that's coming due at a certain day. It's money that's continually rolling over and having new investments.
It's 170,000, 100,000. That's what it is.
Yeah.
It's 100,000 times 170. That's a lot of money. That is a lot of money.
Sure it is, but the point I'm making is the middle class tax cuts would benefit the economy.
How?
More people invest in it because
Invest what? How much are you going to get, and how much are you going to invest?
When I don't.
How much do you earn?
I'm a student in college.
All right, so
if I
you
didn't have to pay for my college like I'm doing, I could put money in the bank, which would in turn benefit the economy because that would allow for new loans and all kinds of other transactions to occur.
But we don't put the money in the bank in this country. We're not savers. We don't put the money away.
There are a lot of people that do that.
Most don't. All right, laugh it up, Robert. Thanks for the call. 1-800-5800-TOM. What can I say? I love these amateur economists who call in here, and they're explaining about investing, and this guy doesn't make a living. He's a student. He doesn't make any money. A tax cut is not going to do him any good. Maybe his parents. I don't know. Let's continue here with Mark in Del Mar, New York. Mark, you're on the Tom Leykis Show. Hello.
Thomas, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm calling from your old haunts up around Albany, the QBK land.
Very well. Now we're on WGY, Mark, so you've got to listen to us at night.
Well, it gives you an idea of my radio habits. Listen,
Well, it's WGY 8 to 11.
I gotcha. I'm usually trying to work during those times.
Well, stop working and listen to the radio, for God's sake.
Tom, here's where I'm at on this. You know, I grew up in Hyde Park, New York, which was really in the shadow of the Roosevelt home. Came to Albany, have spent the last 20 years here. Really a homegrown Democrat in a lot of ways, and I have to tell you that I am beyond belief as to how badly the Democratic Party has lost its focus, lost its position. Can't even begin to get close to articulating what it wants to do. And then last week to watch the president basically take a chameleon flip-flop attitude once again and promise us what we've been hearing from the Republican side was just unbelievable. The most unbelievable part about it to me is that now we're willing to walk away from any traditional belief that government can, in some cases, do a good job.
Mm-hmm.
We believe now that things like the FAA should be privatized. We should let business watch out over its own tail. We're going to trust business to do the right thing.
Well, like we have Rupert Murdoch.
Oh, exactly.
Giving $4.5 million to the incoming Speaker of the House as a book advance while he's being investigated by the federal government. And we just sit back going, Democrats essentially will sit back, and you think that this won't be allowed to stand? You think that Rupert Murdoch won't get to keep owning those stations? Please.
Well, you know, the bottom line to this whole situation here is that we have to take a look at that our government in protecting the rights and the certain safety of our people, whether it's the FDA, the FCC, or any other function of government, my God, the military, we've got to depoliticize these things, and we've got to say, out of that pot, we're not going to cut under the guise that this is somehow returning back to the free market system, regulations that go right out the window.
What bothers me, and I know you agree with me on this, Mark, is the Democrats have become impotent. They have become, you know, they sound like NPR. They sound like they're in a coma most of the time. The fact is, there are people who work and slave, and they're not welfare cheats. They're not lazy bums. They work, and they still can't get ahead.
Exactly.
And there is a need for a party that represents them, and the Democrats are flailing around trying to be Republicans. Hello, what about people who work for a living? What about them?
Tom, one of the things that you said, which is most accurate, really goes to the issue that there can be a caller or a guest on your show that you are diametrically opposed to in terms of opinion, but you respect the person because they're consistent and they articulate and they're clear about what they're trying to say. All of us in our lives will run into people that we just don't agree with, but if that person is clear about what they represent, we can at least respect the position. We're on the verge of losing not only votes, but respect to the Democratic Party because it's incapable.
Well, I'm not a member of the Democratic Party. I refuse to be a member of the Democratic Party.
Well,
until they find somebody who can articulate the plight of people who work hard and actually then have programs to benefit people who just need a leg up, who want to work hard.
Well, of course, as a party, if it represented those people and articulated those people and their plight, you could decide you were going to vote for them or not, but at least you would understand what the party represents. Now you can't even do that because every other day the party zigs and zags in territory that has no business being in. There is nothing wrong with a party having a position. My God, you don't have to like the Communist Party. You don't have to like radical Nazi parties, but you can at least understand what they represent. The
I agree.
Democratic Party is on the verge of losing that focus completely.
I agree with you. Mark, thank you for the call.
Hey, Tom, have a good holiday.
Thanks. I'm glad you caught up with us.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye. Our telephone number toll-free from across America, 1-800-5800-TOM. My name is Tom Leykis. It's 8 minutes now before the hour.
You're listening to the Tom Leykis Show.
5 minutes before the hour. This is America's fastest growing radio talk show from Los Angeles. It's the Tom Leykis Show. Our telephone number here, toll-free, 1-800-5800-TOM. Mike in Burlington, Vermont. You're on the Tom Leykis Show. Hello.
Hello, Tom. This is the first time I've ever heard of you, or in this case, seen you also. But I really like what you have to say. I mean, you've woken me up. I, too, for years, voted Democrat. Vote Democrat for either the Congress or whoever was the better presidential candidate, just to keep them honest. I'm not a native Vermonter. I grew up 35 miles from Washington, and believe me, once they get inside the Beltway, by who constituents? It's just like a little ego trip.
Yeah.
And it's not just Democrats, it's Republicans, conservatives, and them all. And I'm like you. My father worked all his life at a non-technical job. He's fortunate that he still has Social Security now. But I cannot see what the big hype is on this tax cut for myself, who am middle class. I can't see what I'm really going to splurge. I think it works out for me to about $127 a year.
Ooh, invest that in America, will you, while you're out there?
So.
Ooh.
I don't know. I don't see where people... I think I'm catching on to how the economy really works.
Go out and buy a T-bill with that, huh, Mike? Invest in America.
Yeah. You know, I've noticed it's not the politicians that control it. It's this thing called Federal Reserve. Who is Herb Greenspan? Why is he
Alan Greenspan. You mean Alan Greenspan?
Yeah.
I don't know where Herb Greenspan is, to be
That's
honest
true.
with you.
But, it's like, to me, like you told previous call-in person, I would love to invest. I would love to sink thousands and thousands of dollars into a bank and reap in large interest. However, I have mortgage payments, car payments. I like to eat, and it's just, it's hard.
That's right.
And there's, they talk about all the tax breaks and this and that, and when you really sit down and figure it out, not to pick on anyone who's an economist, because I'm not. I'm just a taxpayer. I get paid twice a month. I have to pay my bills. I can't vote myself a pay increase. I can't say, well, I'm $200 in the hole in the bank account, so I'm going to cut my spending, but I'm going to give each of my children a check for $10.
Yeah.
I just...
It's not gonna. It doesn't work.
It doesn't.
It doesn't work. What we need in this country is job retraining.
Yes.
We need to take people who worked on factory assembly lines and worked, like my dad, at newspapers and worked in the fields at jobs that have been taken over by various kinds of farm machinery, and train people to do other things.
Really?
And we need the government to do that and to train people for jobs that are needed, jobs that will be there when they get out.
Yes. Over 55 years ago, they had to do that when we were in the major world war.
Increasing defense spending is not what we need to do right now. Cutting taxes for the middle class by offering tax breaks to people sending their kids to school, that is not what we need to do. We need to cut the budget deficit, and if we're going to be having any dividends here, we ought to be spending them to train people to be productive so they don't become welfare cheats and welfare queens and all of that. Mike, thank you very much for the call.
The Tom Leykis Show.